All right. So yeah, when somebody says goodness, sheesh, it's saying thank you. And sometimes you feel obligated to acknowledge that they said something. So you could say, ah, and that's how you say yes. It's just basically like 3 A's in a row. Some people put tone in certain spots. I have an elder in Puckwan who's really just chewing out. She's like, there's no tone. Yes. So I try to keep it really flat. But then I hear some people go, they start high and they go low. And ah. Some people start low and go, ah. Some people up in the middle, sort of like, almost like in English. It's probably influenced it. I don't think it really necessarily matters. A long time ago, it was probably pretty flat. It just means yes. Other things you could say. So we'll just practice that one. It's got the unvoiced L plopped right in the middle. So I'll say it and everybody repeat. Goodness, cheesh.
Goodness, cheesh.
Goodness, cheesh.
Goodness, cheesh.
Goodness, cheesh.
Goodness, cheesh.
So right in the middle, there's this sound, sort of like you're going to say the word lake in English. And you pay attention to where your tongue goes before you make that L sound. La, la. And your tongue kind of hooks up right behind your teeth, and it comes up to a point like this. So you put your tongue there, but you relax the sides of your tongue and the sides of your mouth. Very relaxed. You blow out the sides. That sound is really common in North American native languages, and it's probably the most commonly mispronounced word in Tlingit. People like to use it, which is good, but they'll say gunush cheesh, or gunul cheesh, or gunach cheesh, but that middle sound is gunush cheesh, and there's that tone at the end, high tone at the end. So a couple of things you could say. You could say when somebody says that to you. You could say away. Everybody say away.
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 With an A with a tone mark, W, E with a tone mark. It's a very interesting word in Tlingit. The way it's most commonly used would probably be like in English we'd say, wow. Wow. And really what I'm doing is I'm signaling that I'm about to start talking. Or maybe that I'm gathering my thoughts. So a good habit to get into, a lot of my second, third, and fourth year students, they're really challenging themselves to use Tlingit. And then they'll start talking, whereas is not a Tlingit thing. So you say, oh, where? And then you got a nice little pause. It's okay to have you can have a fairly long pause sometimes. Those types of things happen. But it's a really good sort of thing. There's several different sort of slight variations, which are probably actually completely different words. But when someone says gunchish, say, oh, weh. So you make the first part a little bit longer. Oh, weh. Oh, weh.
Oh, weh.
As opposed to, oh, weh. So the other thing is if you guys are going somewhere and there's a certain politics, let's say somebody is giving a speech and they called out your clan, the Kagwantan, and instead of just sort of sitting there, because then if the speaker knows Tlingit, they're expecting something. And what they're expecting is, oh, weh. It means sort of like saying, yes, we're here. Yes, we've heard you. You've acknowledged us. We acknowledge you. So that's how that works. And then we'll see away in a variety of different uses. There's also one that means that is. So I could say away. That's a box. Right? But it's a really dynamic word, so just keep watching for it and see it all over the place. So let's see. how did we do with selecting some Tlingit names? Do we have some possibilities?
You're gonna have to help me with this one. But I believe it's Kakao Litit.
Kaushati. So again, whenever you catch yourself going la,
Right.
go okay. O becomes Kaushati.
Kakao Shlati.
Perfect. It's rolling in the swells, the waves. Teat, wave. Okay? Anybody else come up with anything?
I was thinking about trying to translate my dad's last name. Crowson.
What is it?
Crowson?
Crow's son?
Crowson.
Oh, okay. So quick. Yeah. And that would mean child, crow child. Yeah. Yeah. Or you could say a quick to eat. That would literally be the son of a crow.
Is the son?
Yeah. A quick to eat. A quick. So if you look at crow, it's in there. And so, and we'll have chances to practice it. But a good thing would be send this blank piece of paper down.
Yeah.
We'll write it down. Just write it down for me, and I'll make a cool little name tag like this. So
Yeah.
And we'll make one for Jasmine. Jasmine, are you on? I see you there. Okay.
Mine is Kukadla. Well, bubbles.
Oh, okay. Say it again.
K-U high tone, K underline blah.
So K, U with a high tone. And what was it?
K underline,
K underline.
and then D-L-A-A.
Cookla. Cookla.
Kukla.
Cookla.
Kukla.
Okay.
And my language documentation class picked that for me.
Oh, really?
Because everyone was Tlingit students, and I was the only Haida.
Right on. Okay, good. And then, did you pick anything?
Actually, texted my mom and I was like, I don't know if I should choose a name or if I should just stick with my Yupik name. And then I think I'll use my Yupik name as Dutmagalga.
One more time.
Dutmagalga.
Dutmagalga.
Magalga.
Okay, and then can you just write it for us on the paper?
Yeah.
And then I'll hand it out and Monday we'll really drill each other's names and stuff. But next week it begins the retirement process for English names. So, let 'em go. And I would like to continue outside of class. Can you guys see each other? It's just tired. Okay. And you have it, which is Shkugate. And you?
Nowhere.
No, wait. Wait.
I was thinking everybody sounds so interesting, and I was just choosing the word Simshian in Tlingit, which is it's kind of,
Yeah, that works.
I have no idea. Guess it wasn't very interesting. Everybody else's is
But
like
we can,
something so descriptive.
you can think about it, you can send me something different if you want something different. It's totally up to you.
Okay.
And it works, it's just it's a nickname, but if you wanted something, it might be sort of generic for some Tlingit speakers to just call someone Tsimshian, but it could work as well. But we can always add something to it as well if you wanted to have. Because like if there was a canoe that came that belonged to the Tsimshian, we would call it Tsutskango. Tsimshian boat. So we just get because that's like more. So there'd be ways to do something else.
Okay.
Okay. Sheesh. Let's see. Any questions? Anything on your mind before we keep going? Okay. We have two goals for today. One is just sort of an overview of the Tlingit language. The second one is some sound practice. And then next week we'll talk about introduction to beginning Tlingit. And we'll also talk about lesson 1 of beginning Tlingit.
Sorry, can I ask what Alicia's name means real quick?
It's like, good small elephant. In Yupik it means like, a person who like steps, like, like,
Taking steps.
yeah. It's like named after an old man from where my mom grew up. And then at first she like she named, so me and my sister, I have a twin sister, they gave me her Yupik name first, and then they like actually switched them because I guess I was more like the other guy, or like what he would do, so they switched.
You guys identify?
Yeah.
And Jasmine, I can hear you sometimes. Can you hear us?
I can hear you, and I think I have my microphone set up right now.
I hear you. Yeah, sounds right.
Yay! Okay.
Good. You want to tell us your Tlingit name again?
Gage.
Okay.
Gage. Yeah.
Sheesh. And practice names on Monday. And then just jump right in. If you have any questions or anything you want to add, just feel free to practice with us when we're doing our drills. Never feel like you're interrupting, because I wouldn't be able to see you if you were raising your hand necessarily, unless you got a camera. I don't see a camera now.
Nope, I don't.
It's fine. You don't need one. But you can see us. There'll be a little bit of rearranging probably sometime next week, so I'll be towards the front of the room, or I guess it'll be the back of the room, your point of view. And the camera's right there, so that's how we can see her, she can see our faces. All right, Cheesh. So I'm gonna share the screen. We're gonna talk about Tlingit language for a few, and then we'll do some more sound drills. And this time we'll have a little bit of time to explain some of the sounds and also explain some of the names of the words that we're looking at. Oh, so here we are. We're going to talk about the Tlingit language. What do you guys know about the Tlingit language? Let's start there.
I think according to the reading, it's it's not related, but it has a commonality between some of the southwestern nations, the Four Corners region.
Yes, absolutely. Anything else?
Is it in the Athabascan family?
Well, it's related to the Athabascan languages. Yeah. Yes.
The story that the language was given to the people by the trees.
Yeah, well, they talk about our culture being given by the trees. So one thing, we're going to start out just with some sound practice, but then we're going to start learning the names of things. So like when people are taught in elementary school about nouns and verbs and stuff, when do we close that door? So a lot of times when you learn what a noun is, someone will say, oh, it's a person, place, or thing. When we think about nouns in Tlingit, John Martin told me, the word for noun in Tlingit would be asayi, asayi, its name, right? So when we think of the concept of a noun, we're learning the name of something. And it was really interesting because I was filming him and David Katzig. And we just really, a friend of mine, we said, hey, can we make a movie? Can you just tell us the difference between red and yellow cedar? It was a project for the Forest Service. And then they started, we talked for a little while, and they're like, okay, yeah, we can do that. And so the camera started, John Martin went first. And he started naming all of these different trees, right? A whole bunch of them. And at the end, he said, in Tlingit, he said, because we know those names, we are Tlingit, right? Like that's what makes us Tlingit, is the knowledge of those types of things. It was really interesting. And he said, our culture was given to us by the tree people who call us Kwani. There's a way to talk about things in Tlingit that really humanizes them. We'll take a look at that word, but some of you might have heard Kwan. That means people of the little lake. Is the name of that little lake right over there. So you don't have to call it Ak Lake. You just call it Ak, because it already says lake, right? Because if you were to translate Ak Lake, it'd be Little Lake Lake. And another random note, if you wanted to say Snow White, you'd say Lake Lake. But so Kwan means the people of a place. So we'll look at a map that shows the different Kwans for Tlingit. And this is where clan structure, and throughout the whole semester we'll be talking about clan structure because it really fuels that real sense of Tlingit identity. It's really muddled now because you have so few people who speak languages, you have fading knowledge generally about clans and how they're all sort of interrelated in their origin. People get very sensitive about clan information. It's understandable, but sometimes it prohibits us from even just talking about the origin of things for Tlingit, which is what people used to like to talk about. Tlingit has a caste system. When you go somewhere and you visit people, if you ever had a chance to address those people, you might call them Anyat Kusan, little children of the land. That's a term reserved for when you sort of go to visit people and you're speaking to them on their own land. And it's a very, Anyatki means child of the land, but it really means sort of like Tlingit nobility, if we wanted to sort of equate it with European sort of standards. It was people who were of the class of leadership. These are the ones that could talk a lot more openly about clan history and things like that. The things you didn't do is stand up and recite the history of some other clan. If that clan specifically asked you to do that because you had a lot of knowledge, and maybe that was your father's clan or your grandfather's clan, that would be the situation. But otherwise, you're always careful about talking about other clans' knowledge, other clans' property. And this is another concept we'll learn about. It's called At'u. At'u means the things that were all paid for. That's the literal translation. But to sort of find a closer translation maybe is sacred clan property. But even that, it doesn't do it justice. Some things, there's certain terms in Tlingit where you spend a lot of time translating. At'u, one of my great grandmothers said, Ha'at'u ha'kostiyirsati. Our At'u is our life. And so that's how she summed it up. And so a lot of times At'u could be names. It's just something that is owned by a clan. Names, houses, stories, fishing areas, hunting areas, berry picking areas, certain images like a crest, especially if it gets a really specific type of crest. Other things that are At'u would be houses, boats, at times totem poles, and then certain pieces of like if I have a certain tunic and that's what I dance in all the time, that's just mine. But if we had that tunic made, especially, so we're on the Raven side, so if we hired someone who was on the Eagle side to make it for us, and then we brought it out at Tlingit and we killed money on it. Tlingit is extremely metaphorical. Metaphors all over the language. But killing money means you put a bunch of money in a bowl or on top of an object from your clan, and then you sort of use the names of some of your ancestors, and you said Kade, so it goes over them. And now you have completely disassociated that money from yourself. So what you have to do with that money now is give it to your opposites or give it to specific people. Sometimes you come in with a certain allocation. Before money, you put copper on there. There was these little copper shields called tena. It's a symbol of wealth. Or you might put a blanket on there, like a woven object. And then you might actually cut that up or break it into pieces and give it out to people. Or you might just give it to companies. So the clan has put forward some type of payment. Sometimes people would be, we had slaves a long time ago, and sometimes those slaves would be killed. And that would also. But that means something has been sacrificed, given up for that, which is usually money, especially these days. And that means nobody owns it. It belongs to the clan. So you don't get to take it home. You don't get to, usually there's one primary caretaker of the stuff, but nobody gets to really, the clan collectively decides what happens with those things. So some of these concepts we'll keep talking about throughout this semester. They're really important. When you learn the language, you really start to learn how the culture sees the world. So coming back to Tlingit, this is the language family. So the one we really focus on is what we call Na-Dene. The Na-Dene language family is a very large language family. So if we were to sort of step back and picture Alaska, I didn't bring any good images of this. But so if we think of Alaska, we know Alaska looks like on a map. There's about 5 language families in Alaska. So some of the largest ones are, there's a language family that encompasses Yupik, Silpiaq, Benungan, and Inupiaq. So basically, if you went from right around the Cordova area, and you just follow the coast of Alaska all the way around the top. And now Yupik goes across to certain parts of Siberia, and Inupiaq is very closely related language with probably many different dialects, so goes from all the way over to Greenland. So the differences between some of the things to think about is we have the largest group is language family. That means they're related somehow. A long time ago, they were probably the same language. And then we go into languages, which means if I only spoke language A and you only spoke language B, we couldn't really hold a conversation. We might be able to talk about some things, but we would need some sort of jargon, or we would need a translator, or we would have to know both languages. And then within languages, you have dialects. And dialects, it's basically if we sat down with someone from a very rural part of Australia, or maybe even like an urban part of Ireland, or the deep south, right? There might be some things where we're like, I don't really know what that means.
What did you just say?
Yeah, But if we hung out with a person for a month or so, we wouldn't have any problem. There might be certain terms, that they might have that have some other meaning, right? Like, we're not talking about literal definitions. But sometimes different words for the same things like that. So language family, language, dialect. So here we've got the Na-Dene language family, and this probably tells a massive migration story. But we'll get to the Na-Dene language family. Let's do the other ones first. So we got this large one, which they used to call Eskimo language family, or I think they had Aleut Eskimo. Neither of those are necessarily great terms for it now. So it's a language family that usually is just called the Yupik, Aleut, and Inupiaq, But Aleut is also a strange term. Nungan might be better. Silpiaq and Yupik share a fairly close common origin, probably not 500 years ago or so. So then, down in the southeast Alaska, you have a couple of smaller language families, Tsimshianic, which contains the separate languages of Nishka, Gitkasan, and Coast Tsimshian. There may be some relations with some other languages down in the Washington, Oregon area, but I don't know enough about it to say that's for sure. And then on Haida Gwaii, in the southern part of Prince of Wales, you have Haida. Haida is a language isolate, which means it hasn't been proven to be related to anything. It has sound systems that are similar to Tlingit. There's lots of shared words, which is completely understandable. But the grammar is completely different, absolutely 100% different. It seems to possibly have more Pacific Rim sort of similarities than I would say to what you see here, but who knows? Came out of clamshell, Raven found us there.
How many speakers are left in Haida?
In the world, there's maybe 15, 20. In Alaska, there's probably 3 or 4.
Linda said 2.
So Linda is a very good speaker of Haida. And so it always gets interesting when you get to severely endangered languages like this, when you start getting under 20. Because then you start saying, well, yeah, that person knows a lot, but they can't hold a conversation. Because there's some speakers I know of in Haida who can teach you Haida, but they can't really speak it themselves. Like if you just say, okay, well, let's just speak Haida, then it won't work. Yeah, so there's Dolores Churchill, and Dolores said there was 1 or 2 that lived in Ketchikan, but I don't know if
they're. Quest. What's her first name?
Phyllis.
Phyllis, yeah.
She's there. Chuck Netkong is probably pretty good, and he still lives in Sitka. The other thing with endangered languages is that it's very challenging because all your speakers are probably over 80. Many of them are in their 90s. So then it becomes something where it's a delicate issue. You want to raise awareness, but you might say, well, there's 5. And I say, oh, well, so and so just died last year. And then Coast Tsimshian, I've heard that there's about 7. So those are extremely endangered languages. We're trying to figure out some strategies. So this gets us to the Na-Dene language family. It's a very large language family. It's one of the 2 largest in Alaska. Within Alaska, there are 11 Athabaskan languages, and there's Eyak, and then there's Tlingit. Those are all your Na-Dene languages. When you look at like a language tree, this is sort of mapped out. Na-Dene has 2 main branches. There's Tlingit, and there's Eyak and Athabaskan, which tells you that Tlingit probably branched off from this main group long time ago, before the others started branching off. This probably supports northward migration to the coast. In Tlingit, it seems like there were several migrations. The theory that I sort of lean towards is there was one migration up the Nass River, and then there was another migration inland when there was a great flood, and then there was another migration down the Stickeen River, although a lot of people stayed in the interior and came around and down through. So within there, you've got Eyak, you've got Athabaskan. Within the Athabaskan, you basically have northern and southern. Northern would be the languages, a lot of the languages in the Yukon, in the interior of Yukon, some in British Columbia, all of the ones in central Alaska, Anchorage, that sort of area. And then southern would be some along the coast of Washington and Oregon, and Navajo, Apache, and a couple of ones in northern Mexico. So that's where Tlingit comes from. And it's just good to know. The interesting thing is there's one word that's almost identical in probably all of these languages. And within the Na-Dene language, I don't know, there's probably 50, 60 languages. Kach is rabbit. that's the word that has survived. And it was really interesting because, not to, be careful what you say, but it didn't seem like the most important animal, like a raven, or there's no real stories about it or anything like that. So, but it's interesting. It's very similar to most of these.
What is the word and what does it mean?
Rabbit. Sorry. Oh, it's rabbit. Yeah. So then when we get into Tlingit, you have, and people in the dialects is an issue in Tlingit, and it's something that should be protected and preserved and understood. There are three main dialects of Tlingit. The oldest is Tongass, and then probably Southern, and then probably North. Tongass is, nobody speaks Tongass Tlingit anymore. The last speakers died, I think, in the 1980s. And it was spoken around the Saxon area. That's where Tongass was spoken. It doesn't have any tones. We've been talking about tone, Tlingit being a tonal language. Tongass has no tone. So, so the primary difference between these dialects is how tone is handled. So there's a word, H, high tone E, E, N. Right? So that vowel is what we call long and high. And this is how we talk about our vowels in Tlingit. Long and high, short and low. Or long and high, long and low, short and high, short and low. So the word for water or for a river is heen. Everybody say that. Heen. 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 It's water. My little dog, she's 14 months old and she's learned how to say it, but she says low tone. Heen. So we would say high tone. Heen. So it's a long vowel. We really make them long, really high. But if you went to really real Southern Tlingit, what they would speak of Prince of Wales. When we say Southern, we're talking about Prince of Wales, Wrangell, and Petersburg. That's really where Southern Tlingit comes. So we'd say heen, it's a heen. So it would go, it starts high and then it falls at the end. So this is what we call a falling tone. And a lot of the old timers would talk about Southern Tlingits, and they loved the dialect because they'd be like, yeah, they speak this kind of sing-songy Tlingit. That's the way they describe it because it's gone up and down. In Tongass, you would say hitin, hitin, and that's how you would take care of tone. Is you would have this glottal stop right in the middle, and it's great. I can't even do a lot of that stuff thinking about how that works. But then, those are the dialects. So within so Tongass is gone. There's no more speakers of Tongass. It's considered the oldest, probably the first dialect of Tlingit because there's a lot of grammatical patterns that carry on that don't make any sense unless you apply it to Tongass. You can see that they're born out of Tongass. Within Southern, you have Sanya and Hainya. Sanya being Wrangell and Petersburg, Hainya being Prince of Wales. Within the Northern, you have this transitional, which shares a lot of things, in particular with certain pronunciations, like the number 2 is D, but in certain communities they would say D, so the A becomes an E. And there's certain vowels too, like there's certain verbs. You can say yangeyu wane, are you ready? If you're speaking Southern Tlingit, yangeyu wane. It goes from ne to ni. So a lot of it is just simple sound switching that can, it's not hard to take care of. So transitional is primarily cake, but it's also some speakers in Sitka. And even though there's this shared connection they don't quite understand between Southern Tlingits, transitional Tlingits, in both Yakutat and Tesla. They would both do the D as well. And then you've got Greater Northern, which is, okay.
So if you went to a different place, would you change the way you said like a certain word or?
Usually not. Usually you would just stick with your dialect, and then, but I know a lot of people who then, once they realize that there was, a long time ago you just knew. And there might be certain Because when you go to Yakutat, they don't use the same word for cup. They use, what do you call cup in Yupik? Is it chashka?
It's like that.
Yeah, so they both.
Saska.
Saska. Interesting. Okay, so they use chashka, which certain Yupik communities would use that as it comes from a Russian. And then gucha is something different, but gucha is cup if we're outside of Yakutat. So it might be the case where you went somewhere, especially a long time ago, and if you're going to trade with somebody, then you need them to know what you're asking for. So a lot of times you would understand those dialects, and it would be interesting to, who knows what it was like a long time ago when you had an awful lot of speakers, which we don't now. But how much they would change their own language for it to a different place. But usually people just sort of stick with what they do. And some people, they get mad about dialect stuff. I don't really know why. But a lot of people, they just think it's really fun. They think it's really interesting.
Can I ask a question like off?
Yeah.
Okay. So when I don't know what they do here when they agree with somebody, but like where I'm from, when they agree with somebody, they like raise their eyebrow.
Right.
Yeah. Or do like the head down or something. I don't know.
Well, I heard that you don't get it's pretty vocal here, so you don't have. I think there is some nonverbal communication, but usually, like if somebody's talking and you agree with them, you would actually yell out to them sometimes. Get away! Like right now they're talking. So it is quite different. And I'd heard about school teachers who would go to Western Alaska and they'd be asking the kids questions, and the kids are raising their eyebrows to answer, and they're getting mad because they're not answering the question. So, but they were actually answering the questions. Yeah. But there's only a couple nonverbal things I know. They're not very nice things. They'll teach me at some point. Okay. So within Greater Northern Tlingit, which has by far the most speakers right now, you have Central Gulf Coast in Gulf Coast is Yakutat, Dry Bay. Inland is Carcross, Teslin, and Atlin, although Atlin seems to be very similar to coastal. Teslin, a lot of times where it would have a W, if there's the word Galdon, which is a horse, and they might say Gumdon, so it just becomes an M. There's only, not all the W's do, certain ones do. There's a pattern. And then Teslin or Carcross, sometimes they'll use the M as well, but more, the default vowel in Tlingit is an A. But for certain languages around Carcross, it's an E. So sometimes an A will change to an E. So another word I taught my little daughter is, the youngest one is ha'eh. So ha'eh just means like if I spilled something or dropped something, or if you did something that I thought was silly, or maybe that I didn't approve of. Okay, ha'eh. So it means like, holy cow. Right? That's probably a good translation. They're always hard to translate. But so when you say ha'eh, but you go to Carcross and they say he'eh. So it's just a little slight difference, but it's something you can learn. So what I always recommend to people who are learning Tlingit is wherever you're from, when you go there and engage with people in the language, pick up their patterns, right? Because that's where you'll see how dialect works. And just honor the dialect of where you're from. And if you want to go somewhere, like say if you move to Cape and you want to speak like they do in Cape, go for it. It's not that hard. It would be really like, because some people are like, I don't want to learn from him because he speaks this dialect, which is just kind of crazy because it's easier you can learn English from somebody that spoke English and then move to England and you'll figure it out. But it would be much easier than saying, I'll just learn English when I get to England. So that would be a lot harder. All right, so that's the dialects.
So on the Gulf Coast, would that include people from the Copper River Delta?
Well, so the people who are up there are mostly Atna people. It's a different language. But there's a whole group of Atna people who moved down and became Tlingit.
Are they Ayak or?
Well, so I think there are probably some Eyak people as well. So a long time ago, like the word Tlingit is so politicized now with ANCSA, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, right? So what, 100% Tlingit. And one of my students was coming to the evening class on Tuesday, and someone said, they're like, what are you doing here? You graduate. He's like, oh, well, I'm coming to Tlingit linguistics. Do you have any Tlingit blood? And if you're speaking the Tlingit language, you would say Shingit Cruz. Like that's a person, that's a bear, right? And it means human being. It was used to differentiate sometimes between people. Because, Tsimshian people were Tsimshian people, and Haida people were Haida people. And so sometimes you would say, well, this is a Tlingit thing, and this is that other type of thing. Did I answer it?
You didn't know, but I like where you took it.
Tell me again. Yeah, we got lost.
Well, in my last class, yeah. Yeah,
we were in the class.
Yeah, she was there, and she was, doing her thing, and I was like, okay, is that just, what dialect would that be? Because she's from Congo River Delta, right?
I don't know.
Yeah.
She's from Yakutat? That's why she knows Jennifer.
Huh?
I thought she was from Sudan.
Well, her Yakutat and Huna. Both.
Oh, okay.
I think she grew up mostly.
Well, that answered my question.
But yeah, but the interesting thing is there's plenty of, and when we get to clans and we look at them, there's plenty of people that just came in and they just became Tlingit. They started speaking Tlingit and they just became Tlingit. Before, they were Ata or Iyak, or there were some Haidas who came up and they became Tlingit.
Yakutat's a blend of Athabascan too, and Tlingit and Iyak and
Yeah.
everything.
Do they have any Tsimshian?
No, that's too far north.
They have some songs though, and there's a place name out there. I think there's a place called it's called Cut or something. So there's lots of inter-trading and lots of stories, and there's specific, there's war stories and there's get along stories, just like everywhere you go, right? So when I was in Atlan, there was some Talton kids who came over and they were doing a leadership camp. It was really fun. People kind of hinted around about how they fought a couple times. For the most part, everybody would just have to see each other. Let's see, well, that's enough of this stuff. So an hour goes by very fast.
Oh, I mean, wow.
All right. Can you see that, Jasmine? Can you see the same screen we're looking at with the got the pictures and everything on it now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we got 10 minutes. We'll power through this. We'll do them each twice. Monday, I promise, we'll do it slow. Okay. Ready? Wasus. Masus. So we're getting into these, what we call pinched consonants. So what's going on here? And we'll talk about linguistics and language learning and other things throughout this semester. But when you're talking, a lot of people talk with their hands. Like I'm always talking with my hands. But some people do that for emotion. Some people do it just out of their personality. But it's also been shown to be a timing mechanism for your talking. Making language is hard. You got to start and stop. You're doing all this stuff. And that's why you just did an experiment. You just say, you sit down with someone and say, hey, sit on your hands and let's talk and see how long it takes until we get uncomfortable. And for me, it doesn't take very long because I feel like I'm like, let my hands go. But it's because you use them to help you communicate. And it's to help your body physically do these things. And it's also a big thing. So what's going on when we get to these pinched consonants? When you see that apostrophe, is we're going to make that same consonant sound, but you're not going to use your lungs. So it's like you took a breath, and this part of your neck becomes a piston to push whatever air you have out. So instead of going, without breathing. And it gets to be a bit of a challenge, because a lot of people, they'll say, eat, and there's like this gap. What you want to practice is closing that gap. So you go, that sound goes straight into the vowel. It's not a pause. In English, you usually don't close off your lungs. Da,
Da.
da,
Da.
Muskrat?
A.
Emily? No.
Hold on, an ermine?
Mm-hmm. It's an ermine. So it turns white in the winter, and we trap it. We make cats out of it. So it's an ermine. So we pay attention, da, that high tone. We're also going to encounter a bunch of homonyms and Tlingit where they sound exactly the same, but they actually have different meaning. And there's a few of them, like you could say da with a high tone. Da is an ermine. A da is around something or about something. So you'll see that da pop up, but if it's got the high tone, then glade.
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 And that's a D, right into this L sound. But it ends up slightly quick. Glade.
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 There's a lot of times things transform over time. And as you get fewer speakers, so there's a term, gla, right? And you say it when it's too much, right? Like someone takes a joke too far, or someone's just being ridiculous, or something it's just too much. It's just ridiculous. Gla. Or you can say hadla, right? I'm throwing in the towel. A lot of people would say gla with the G sound. That GL combination does not exist. So when I first came here, and I loved to see people using language, they were making signs that were saying gla. I was like, I gla your gla. There's no gla. Gla. It's the gla sound. Glade. The other thing to note is this is the word for snow, but it's also a word for the color white. So every color in Tlingit means it's like something. And there's a whole, I'll bring in a color chart later, there's like a bunch of colors. There's usually some main ones. Yellow is always a tough one because there's like which is a type of mushroom that grows on a tree. I think it's yellowish. Shu is an eagle's beak, that's kind of orange. Or if something is really, really kind of bright yellow, that's Ketu, which is dog pee.
Do they have a word for blue?
Aish, and that's a stellar J. But if it's a light blue, then that's hot, which is blue sky. And so the way that these things work is there's a verb, which is yeti, and that means it's like that. Right? It's like something. And this is just like a simile in English. So you could say yeti. It's like a stellar J. But for there's just certain words that are used for colors. And then once you use that yeti, you know. But if we had a dog that, for whatever reason, was blue, instead of, you could say yeti. That dog is like a stellar J, means that dog is blue. But if you're talking about a blue dog, you would just cut the middle part, HK, and you just know, you just understand it. It doesn't mean blue jay dog, it means blue dog. Zait.
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 So again, a D and a Z. Za. Za. So it's just got a little bit of a, not a true like duh at the end, but just a little bit of a za.
Za.
Za. Za.
So,
And this is, there's also in Tlingit, there's sometimes one word could mean many things. And this is the instant. It could be a ladder. It could be stairs. It could be a dock. It could be a boardwalk. It has something to do with boards in a row that you walk on. And there's probably ways you could differentiate, because if you were telling someone and zombies were chasing you, you say, go across the zig. Like if there was a ladder and a dock and a boardwalk, I would just find it. Janmu. 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 See, it goes, they're both very short vowels, so you don't go John. Right? That's like a guy who makes action movies. Janmu. That's a mountain goat. In some of the early dictionaries, there was confusion between mountain sheep and mountain goat. I don't know the whole origin, but I know somebody asked somebody to translate something in Tlingit, and it was like a biblical thing, and it was like the shepherd, and they're like, he was herding sheep, and so they used Tawid, which is like a mountain sheep, and it was just a really weird story for elders, because they're like, why would you, can't herd a mountain sheep? It's not gonna listen to you. Next. So here's that unvoiced L that we were talking about. This one starts and ends with that sound. Shloosh, 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 shloosh. Yep, get to the pinched L. So for that last one, it's putting your tongue in the same location as you're making the voice sound. La. But instead of blowing up the side, la. For this one, you put your tongue in that same position, but then squish it. When you squish your tongue, you get the squishy sound, and there's two real varieties of this sound. I've heard both from fluent speakers. One is sort of a fast, hissy sort of a sound. So you're not blowing with your lungs are still off. The other way is if you got like a little lake of spit basically in your tongue, and then it rings a little bit more. So this one is ooh, 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 ooh. Or you can say ooh, 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 ooh. In the sneaky sound territory, and we'll do one more and then we'll be out of time. Noose, 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 noose. Paying close attention to the vowels. When they're long, we make them long. When they're high, we make them high. And when this word ends with a KW, that end sound is just like this. So you end up just sort of blowing. So when you see that W, that means the W means your mouth is going to round. The Y means it's going to pull back. News. News. Right. Any questions? So you guys Monday, we'll start doing some drills. We'll have stuffed animals and things. Yes, I'll send you a message. I might need you to just have some things near you.
okay.
Props. Okay. Finish cheese.
Goodness cheese. So yay.
Clean.